Levy, thanks so much for having this conversation with us, and I'm looking forward to your wisdom around wine.
I'm happy to share.
So how did you get interested? What got you started in all this?
No joke, we grew up poor. There wasn't a lot of wine around. My parents didn't drink wine, and it was just very exotic and different. So I did a lot of things that my parents didn't do. So they did a lot of drugs. I didn't. They never went to restaurants, they didn't drink wine, and they never went to movies. So as soon as I left home and went to college on the other side of the country, I went to movies all the time, restaurants all the time, and I drank a lot of wine, and I never got into drugs. So.
Wow. So do you thank your parents for all this?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Mom, thank you. It's just like winning a Super Bowl. You know? Couldn't have done it without you.
Did your parents have a sense of humor?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah, when they weren't angry, sure. Yeah.
So you experienced wine, like you said, when you went to college, I guess. But what got you so far into it, where you started working at some of the most famous restaurants in the world? And
again, just ignorance and desire to, I have a natural curious personality, but I think, to be really honest with you, I think it was something I felt excluded from in my own life, and I felt like here's a chance to learn about something that was maybe what other people had in their lives. As a young person, there was maybe a slight chip on the shoulder, but that's been so long ago, it's totally different now.
What'd you study in school?
Art history. Yeah.
Oh, art history.
Yeah. They said, "Do you want to sit in a room with 300 attractive young women with the lights out?" And I said, "That sounds pretty good to me."
Did you get to paint any of them?
No. That's art.
Oh, okay.
Art history is you just look at slides in a dark room, and a guy says, 100 years ago they painted this. And it's full of women. So as a young bachelor, I was like, "This sounds great." It's kind of like Animal House.
How'd that work out for you?
I mean, I'm married.
So somebody actually married you, so it worked out.
Yeah. It's everyone's got their closer move, and mine is definitely take them to the museum.
Well, yeah, because you'd be very impressive in a museum.
Exactly. That's the only setting, though. Yeah. Also restaurants. I'm good in restaurants.
Do you see any parallels between wine and art history?
I learned a lot of European and Catholic history that I did not know growing up as a Baptist and not in Europe. Right. And that was really helpful later. Also, some geography. Yeah. All that was really helpful because the things that affected art in historically also affected wine historically. Right. If you're talking about Europe, which you would be because the Muslims don't drink wine.
Good point. So with the geography as far as wines, have you been able to travel the world and really learn about cultures and so on through your wine experience?
The people who are jealous of my meager life, that's the one thing they're jealous of, is I travel a lot. So I have been through most places at some time or another, either specifically for wine or discovering wine in those places after the fact. I've traveled a lot.
And you've also worked at world famous restaurants like Danielle in New York City or Masa. These are Michelin 3-star restaurants. What's it like when you're having to serve a high level clientele and make recommendations, et cetera?
In a way, honestly, it's easier. Yeah. There's so much trust placed in you when you work at a restaurant like that. People think that you must know what you're doing, and also at the same time, you get a lot of clientele who are celebrating a special occasion, and it's not their everyday place.
Right.
And so they want you to take care of them and kind of lead them through. So if you can make it to that level, it's actually easier because the hardest part is always establishing trust in your recommendations and authority on this subject. And so it's, in a way, much easier. Another way, it can be a little inhibiting because you're only dealing mostly with the luxury tier. And there's a lot of wine that's not in the luxury tier. There's a lot of good wine that's not in the luxury tier. Right. And so you can end up in a world that's, you're doing one of 5 things a lot.
Yeah. So you try and navigate those waters. So with those wine lists in those restaurants, I have to imagine you were largely responsible for deciding what gets on the list and kind of how to assemble the offerings. What were you?
Different stages in my career.
Yeah.
I've also worked as a floor sommelier as well, where you work with someone else's list.
Right.
And both are really informative because inevitably you're going to learn something you didn't know from a selection someone picked.
Right.
But then the ownership and then the sense of responsibility of training a staff to work with the selections you made.
Right.
Because you have to convince them that what you picked is good and get them on board with it. Both of those are a really helpful experience. I wouldn't say either one is lesser in a way.
It's interesting for me, and this is like we're trying to demystify wine to a
Oh,
large
okay.
extent,
Yeah, sure.
as far as the people who would watch this. I mean, some people will be wine experts or very interested in what you have to say, but at the same time, I notice that whenever my wife and I are going out to dinner,
Right.
and we're with other people, other couples, sometimes bigger dinners, when the wine menu hits the table, it's always like they always just pass it right to me because I have some experience with wine.
Sure.
I used to wait tables in a restaurant, which is where my experience started. But then, fell in love with wine. I travel the world,
Yeah.
and like to taste, et cetera. But so now, let's say I'm not at the table, and somebody's sitting down. Maybe they're going to make your move. They're taking this gal to a restaurant they're trying to, they're interested in, and the wine list comes, and they really don't know how to, go through the list, how to start selecting. What advice would you give someone who is just starting out or is trying to at least get some kind of a game going?
So in terms of demystifying wine, I think I'm a pretty good example because I think nowadays I have a reputation, and I sometimes people think I'm very intellectual about wine, I think. But I grew up in a trailer park with no wine. So what this proves to everyone, I think, is that anyone can do it. Yeah. Like it's not... if you want to, you can learn. So I think if someone were coming in and they didn't know a lot about wine, if they want to learn, I find, maybe it's just my personality, I find that the wine world is very welcoming and wants you to come in. I think they would much rather introduce you to wine than have you drink a cocktail. Right. Typically, people who like wine, because it's something you would like to share with someone. It's a pleasure. It's a great joy to drink really good wine and compelling. So in just the same way that people get really excited about music and want other people to hear that music, that's really how real wine people are.
Right.
And by that I mean not brand salesmen, because there are brand salespeople. Right. And that's another part of the wine world, and that's fine. Everyone's got a job to do. But the people who love wine don't really treat it like a job, and you'll notice right away when you're talking to one. And then the key is to just trust them, because they're trying to help you. And if you treat it like they're trying to help you, then it's great. If you find yourself in a situation where it doesn't feel like the person's trying to help you, it's just you're at the wrong restaurant.
So they shouldn't be intimidated, but when they get a wine book basically of a menu, and they can ask for the sommelier or the wine expert to come over and say, hey, listen, here's sort of what I like, and you help make some recommendations for me. And and what's the appropriateness of giving them kind of like a price range? I mean, they need to know that, I guess, before they can make suggestions.
Well, there's all kinds of ways you can do it. I mean, some people will point. Some people will say, this is kind of what I like, and all those wines are in a certain price range.
Right.
You can just give a price range. I find, and maybe this is just a ludicrous wine person speaking, but I find it's sort of like real estate. You go to the right apartment and suddenly you're willing to pay $200 more a month just because you love that apartment.
Right.
And wine's sort of the same thing. $20 here, $40 there. It becomes irrelevant if you love the wine.
Right.
And that is possible to find. Really, honestly, a good sommelier will probably downsell you, because the thing is, most people who don't know anything about wine have heard of expensive wines because those are established brands. But the sommelier is tasting wine all the time, and they're exposed to things that are not famous and thus are less expensive. Right. So again, it just comes down to trust. If someone is telling you, I hear you like this wine, why don't you try this wine? I think you'll like it as well. And it happens to be $30 less. I mean, they're probably really telling you the truth. There's no other benefit for them. They don't get a bonus on that.
Right. And I think that's an interesting point, because very often, at least in my own experiences, I'll do that. Say, I kind of like this and this. Well, what do you think is drinking great right now that I might not know about? And I almost am never let down, because you're right, these guys are tasting, or gals, and they know what's there.
I mean, there's different levels of professionalism in any business, and I think that's true of sommeliers too. But I know that myself and people that I've worked with, if you tell me that you're trusting me, the sense of responsibility that I have on that is huge. Yeah. So I feel like I have to over-deliver if you're trusting me. If you come in and say, I like this, go and get it for me, that's a relationship, and then it's a point A to point B business relationship that we're going to have, and that's fine. I'll stay out of your way and give you perfect service. But if you're coming in and saying, like, you seem like you really know about wine, please help me. I mean, I'll do anything for you, because you're trusting me to, you know what I'm saying?
And that's actually, I think, another good point. You're not bothering the person. That they're there. They would love to have this conversation and actually put their mind and experience to work, as compared to saying, go get me this bottle.
Yeah, again, I mean, if they love wine, they love sharing wine. Yeah. It's just like if you love music, you love going to concerts.
Well, let's talk about that, because this is one of the things when we talk about the experience of wine. the shared experience, the social aspect of it, I think, is a big part of why the wine world exists.
Probably. I mean, I think it's been very successful, the 750 milliliter bottle. Like if it were all half bottles, probably be half as successful. Because, someone's got to finish the bottle. So that usually means a little bit more of a group and a little bit more extra glass and a little bit more laughing and joking around.
You're the first person that's I've heard ever bring that up as far as saying, well, the 750 is the standard size. And if you think about it, that's a sharing size.
Yeah, I mean, that's 2 or 3 people right there.
Yeah.
And unless you have, you're going to keep it for the next day or something.
Or unless you're my partner who's the producer.
Well, you probably put that person, if they're under a lot of stress, it's a different story. We've all been there. Yeah.
So you're in Slovenia right now at this masterclass. So what brought you here?
Well, they asked me to come, but also it's a region that I've visited before, and I know it's beautiful, and I know the wines merit a lot of attention, and the food's great, and the people are super hospitable, and when you add all those things up, there's not a lot of reason not to be here. It's also climatically very pleasant, and it still has a rural charm to it as a place that's actually pretty hard to find. Certainly when you live in Manhattan, it's not the norm.
Right. I had no idea that there were these great Slovenian wines. So when we got the invitation to come and do a part of our series here, I was like, Slovenian wines, I'm not familiar. And then once we knew we were coming, we started to try some. I was very surprised by the quality of the wines coming out of the region.
Problem with Slovenia is that it's been called so many other things at other times of the world, and it doesn't have that continuity. But what you have heard of is wines from near Venice, and you've heard of wines from Austria or Hungary, when you've heard of wines from the Collio, and those are all the same thing because the Venetians were through here, the Austrians under the Habsburgs were through here. The Italians ran this part of the world for a little while. It's an area that's seen a huge flux in terms of who's in charge at any given time. Yeah. And anytime that happens, that means that the historical continuity is a little less in terms of name recognition.
Yeah, you lose brand, right?
You lose brand. I mean, in marketing terms, you lose brand. Unfortunately, also they've had a lot of hardship, as for the same reasons.
Yeah. Now, you do a podcast.
Yeah, so I interview people in my home. I have them over and we speak about wine. And sometimes it's people I've known for a number of years, other sommeliers I used to work with. And then other times it's vintners, winery owners, importers, and wine journalists as well.
And it's I'll Drink to That, I think is the name of it?
Yeah, I'll drink to that. Not Al. Not like all will drink, but I will, but with an apostrophe.
Yeah.
Very super hard in Sweden, I found out recently. They don't have apostrophes. I found this out in the language.
No, ill drink to that.
Yeah, ill. Yeah. It's like Dr. Dre or something like that.
So tell me, maybe your most memorable podcast you ever had.
Both times that someone has started to cry, it's been a male guest, and both times it's because they're remembering someone that's passed away that they really liked. And I think it's, these are people in both cases who are older than me, and I think when a tear is passed, it's something that doesn't make it onto the audio because I don't do video, and so it's a moment that we're just sharing ourselves, and it's certainly not for the tape. They're not saying something that they want other people to hear. They're just expressing a real emotion that they feel. And I think those kind of things really stay with you. But there's so many things, really.
Yeah, and this is the thing I think people understand about wine. It's not just this beverage. I mean, there's really a whole spiritual side of this, a human element to it that as you really get the story, it's something that touches people deeply.
Well, I mean, a lot of people's lives are wrapped up in this story, the wine story. But it's also, there's a community of people who enjoy this. And there's a reason. It's because it tastes delicious. So.
Yeah, and you've done how many interviews now?
Well, it's 455 released. I still have some editing work to do to get a few more out. But it's been over 6 years.
Are you loving the process?
Yeah, it's been a learning process for me. I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah.
I thought, as I'm sure you know, to be a great interviewer, not to say I'm great, to be a better interviewer, you have to learn some empathy and you have to be interested in people. Yeah. And I have to say that that has been, I won't say I was the worst at it, but I've gotten better. And it's really pleasurable in your own life when you take more interest in other people. It shows real benefits that are way beyond the show.
What do you think the future of the wine industry is? Do you think it's going to stay on a similar track? Do you think things are changing?
Are you talking about the American wine industry? Because it's really diverse.
Well, okay, let's talk about the American wine industry then.
So I think we're really splitting up. I think for a long time there was, say, two tracks. There was the kind of industrial jug wine track,
Right.
and then there was the luxury track. But the luxury track and the industrial track were separated by about $80. Now they're separated by about $5,000. So in between, there's been a lot of room has been made in between. At the same time, the clientele has shifted because essentially there was prohibition, there was World War II, and in the 50s, people started to get interested in wine. There were some key importers, but there was a break there. And then the generation that really took it on was the baby boomers. And so it hasn't been that long. And the thing about the baby boomers is it was a very brand conscious generation in general when it comes to marketing terms.
Right.
And they tended to like the same things. And what you see now as the millennials are coming on the scene with as many people in the generation as the baby boomers, it's really opening up the space of what people are interested in. And so instead of a wine culture, you see wine cultures. So there's a lot of different wine groups, whereas before there was people who liked wine and they tended to agree, or maybe they disagreed about this, but that was the wine folks.
Right.
I would say it's really diverse now. It's like going to a university and finding a number of different programs available.
Yeah, it's interesting because that would make sense relative to millennials because of that whole what they call that long tail phenomenon where there's all these little subgroups that can get their satisfactions as compared to through internet, like music. I mean, how many people now can post music that never could before, et cetera?
That's a huge point. Yeah, the access to information is radically different, and that's one reason why it's not going to go back. Like sometimes people say, like, oh, these things that were popular in the '90s are going to come back, and the one fundamental difference is the access to information, because it used to be everyone was working off books that were 10 or 15 years old,
Right.
if there was a book. Like, for instance, if you were to say to me, I'd like to find a good book on Slovenian wine in English,
Right.
I wouldn't even know what to tell you.
Right.
But I can find a lot of information online.
Yeah.
And so with that change, there was just so much more understanding of what was out there, both on just the pricing level, like I could search for something and see how much it costs, but also just all the details about winery websites and critics, and that just wasn't true when I started my career. So
Right. So on the personal level, what do you enjoy most in the world of wine?
I mean, what I really enjoy most is to meet someone over a number of years and become friends with them whose wine I also like. This is the thing I like the most.
Yeah.
And it sometimes doesn't work out. Sometimes you love the wine and the personal factor is different. You
Right.
know, there's difficult people who are geniuses who make amazing wines, but they're not the funnest to just hang with.
Right.
But other times it works out beautifully, and you end up with a relationship that's so multifaceted.
Yeah.
You really like what they do. You enjoy it in places when you're not with them, but you've also developed a friendship over years, and you meet the kid that gets older, and you're there when the father passes away. And these are things that give a resonance that's hard to find with like other produce, like
Yeah.
broccoli. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just hard to do that. So there's a way that wine, if you want to, wine really lets people in. I'm always surprised when people feel like wine keeps people out, because my experience has been the opposite.
In our quest to demystify wine, that's a really important statement because the especially the outside world, say that if you're not a wine insider, they would say, oh, it's kind of this. There's a snobbiness about wine and people who are wine experts, and the way that they will describe young balsamic and star anise and these terms that that seem to be somewhat unapproachable for the mere mortal. But I also meeting especially winemakers and seeing their love of life, their love of soil, their love of the nature and the experience of wine and what it brings. And coming from an Italian family, how wine is on the table and we'd sit there for hours and that whole thing. It really is, I think, the opposite effect. I think it really is sort of saying, hey, maybe we have different political views or something, but as soon as good wine comes out, we can start talking about that. All the other things seem to melt away.
I usually find that if someone is making you uncomfortable about wine, it's because they feel uncomfortable around wine. And so those are just good people to go away from.
Yeah.
I feel like people project insecurity in a way that can be aggressive. And I just think that people who really are used to wine and live with wine, they would share it with you like anything else. I really think one of the things that I think is happening that also means that the American wine culture is so different is that more people are just conversant with wine as an everyday thing. And when you're around someone like that, it's a nice thing. It's like any other nice thing. It's like having a great cup of coffee or a really great piece of uni. I mean, wine tastes good.
Yeah. Anything else you're working on relative to wine that you're really excited about?
Well, I'm a father now. My son's 2.5, and so that's been a big project. Yeah. And you know, we've christened him with a little wine now and again. Sure.
Yeah. What's his name?
Louis, Louie.
Louis.
Which then the royal family in Britain, they copied us about a year later. So,
yeah, look at that. Yeah. You must be a very important person.
We have a lot of influence, sure.
Did you supply the wine for their...
You know, we're not. We don't have the HRH seal yet, but I figure maybe next time.
That's awesome. And your wife, did wine have anything to do with your relationship, marriage?
Like most marriages, my wife's a better taster than me. Like her palate's great. She's Japanese and she drinks less, but her food is amazing. Yeah. So it's we're a good pair, we're a good team.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting you say. I think my wife also maybe somewhat less wine experience than me, but definitely a better palate as far as being able to pick things out.
I think it's really great to get someone who's non-prejudiced by what is expensive and what's really famous, and put a glass of wine in front of them and see what they say about it, because it gives you an unprejudiced take on what they think about it. Yeah. And they're telling you the truth, and they're not telling you something that's made up in magazines or something. And the funny part about it is that my wife always knows it's expensive by just tasting it. She's like,
she could tell.
Well, what she'll say is like, "This one's good. We should drink more like this." And I'll be like, "Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?"
Yeah. So, well, that's what's great about being in the wine business. You get to try a bunch of wines that people give you the bottle to say, hey, review this.
In all seriousness, I find that in general, as long as you bring something to the table, and that could be humor or knowledge or just a sense of life, I find that the wine community is super generous in general. Like people are really, I mean, maybe because the bottles are 750 milliliters, people do want to share wine with other people. Yeah. I find.
That's, and I find that also. So for the viewer who's looking at this and leaning into the conversation, any final thoughts or words you might have?
I mean, just don't be afraid, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. I mean, you can do it. So if you want to enjoy a great glass of wine, I mean, it's out there to enjoy. I won't say that every wine is great, and I will say that you will change what you like over time. I mean, if you stick with it, you're going to change too, and things that you used to like, you won't like. That in itself is a really good learning experience about yourself. Wine can teach you a lot about you if you want it to.
Great words of wisdom. Well, Levy, thanks so much for sharing your humor and your expertise with us.
It's my pleasure. And usually people don't listen to my jokes; they leave, and you were forced to stay. So I felt like
good jokes.
Captive audience. Hey, thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
You too. In so many cases, humor and wine belong together. And Levi certainly brings them together with great expertise in a very unique way. I really enjoyed that interview, and I was really happy to share it with you. So I hear these two categories always used. One is saying, oh, that's an old world wine, that's a new world wine. What's the difference between the two?
The best way to describe it is old world wine, you're drinking where the wine comes from, and the new world, you're drinking who made it. So in these new world wineries, sometimes you can have grapes from all over the area, but if there is a hand or a winemaker behind that can give an imprint, you're drinking the product of a great winemaker.
So these are styles, basically.
These are styles.
And to an extent, are they regions? Like, in other words, is Italy, France, Spain considered old world in general, and United States and South Africa, Australia, they're kind of new world? Yeah.
Yes, I would probably define it as Europe and close parts of Europe are considered old world, and a new world is the rest of the world.
And but what's interesting in what you just said is that you can have people in, say, Europe doing new world styled wines because the winemaker's really working hard on getting a certain flavor profile, or maybe somebody in The United States is doing more old world, where they're kind of leaving it alone, let the terroir represent, et cetera. So
Absolutely. So to me, new world and old world defines more style, because as you said, you can have in any part of the world someone to choose to really highlight that specific vineyard, that specific soil, and to me is just a old world making wine, where you have some other winemakers in any region of the world that decides that they want to not highlight the climate or the terroir, but highlight maybe a skill that they have or an outcome that they want, and that becomes more like a new world wine.
So there's more winemaker ego in a new world wine, and
A
less
little
of it.
bit,
They get out of the way in the old world style.
But and for me, there is not right or wrong.
Yeah.
They're both good. I like personally better old world wine to be paired with food as a dining experience,
Right.
and new world wine by themselves.
And that's actually very interesting, because we had talked previously about food pairing, but a lot of times, we're just drinking wine without food, and New World, I guess, is maybe a little bit more interesting to drink like that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes, and is more interesting to drink old world wine with dinner. There is a better and a more skillful wine pairing with old world wine with food than new world.
Very few restaurants have a Michelin 3-star rating, and only one restaurant each year is voted the #1 restaurant in the entire world. And in 2017, that was 11 Madison Park. I had the opportunity to dine there recently with my wife, and while there, I got to meet Christopher Dooley, the sommelier. And boy, was it a great experience to sit and share food and have this man help me pick wines that would accompany my food properly. What an environment, what a meal, what a great experience. And now I get to share a conversation with you with Christopher Dooley, the sommelier at 11 Madison Park. Chris, really excited to have this conversation, so thanks for making the time for us.
Yeah, happy to be here, yeah.
You work at 11 Madison Park, which, one of the most famous restaurants in the entire world, Michelin 3-star, voted best restaurant in the world, I think, 2017. Let's just get a little background on you. How did you get into doing what you're doing?
Sure. I have a theater background. It's something that
Theater?
Yeah. So I did a lot of acting many years ago, and I lived in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I always did restaurants and I did theater. Kind of did both at the same time. I would look at the wine list and I was like, well, why would we have this many Sauvignon Blancs or this many Merlots or what have you? Like, what's really the difference? And I just kind of dove in. So I started buying a bunch of bottles. There's a really great liquor store. It's like the Candyland of liquor stores in Newport, Kentucky. And so I would just buy things and taste it and read all about it and kind of start to piece together what these meant. And over time, I eventually got more into restaurants and into better restaurants, into better wine lists and things like that. So I was exposed more to these greater wines, and I was at a moment where I had to choose. A mentor of mine who's on the wine side was like, look, you're really great at acting, and you're really good at acting, and you're really good at restaurants, but you'll never be truly great until you choose one. Mm-hmm. So I thought about that for a long time. With wine, I'm able to kind of turn my brain off and then just enjoy wine as it is. It's just a beverage. And with theater, it got to the point where I was no longer able to enjoy it in the way that made me want to do it in the first place.
Right.
I was just too analytical. I would tear things apart, and I would go to shows and I wouldn't be able to enjoy myself. So once I realized that I really wanted to do wine. And so I took a job in Boston, a restaurant called Le Sommelier.
I know that. I've been to that restaurant.
Right, absolutely, over on
restaurant.
Boylston.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just being able to touch those bottles, because just being on the East Coast and in a major city like that, you get access to a lot more wines that were just like flashcards to me.
How do you get in there? Did you interview for the job? Or?
Sure. So the great thing about being a sommelier or being in the wine community in general is the community. It's you pay it forward and you meet so many people. So I was doing a lot of like competitions and things like that. And so I would be down in New York, or I'd be down in I did competitions in Hollywood, Florida, like these places, and then you just get to meet people. And you meet people from all over the country, and eventually you have this like network. I just had these people that I knew worked at 11 Madison Park, and then I was like, oh, these people are really nice and very smart and helpful and all these things. I was like, I would love to work for a restaurant like that. And I just kind of I sent my resume to like the info line at 11 Madison Park, and I ended up getting a phone call a few days later and asking for an interview. So we did. And I trailed there. So I just kind of watched service for the evening. 9 months later, because there wasn't a position available at the time, they're like, this is great. We'd love to kind of put me in the queue. I would just kind of check in every few weeks, be like, is anyone left yet? Just enough to like keep my name remembering, but not be annoying, and go right to the the delete folder.
Right.
And so eventually, a few months later, somebody had left. I came on, and it was a very like seamless transition. As that person left, I came on live, and so it was really terrific. And yeah.
Wow. Now you just recently got promoted. So what's your new title there?
So I'm the assistant wine director at Live in Madison Park.
So now that means not only are you on the floor working with the guests, but you also now are responsible for building in the list and buying the wine and figuring out how to assemble your menu there.
Yes. Very excited to do that. I have the wine director, Cedric Case, is fantastic, so I'm able to work basically even closer with him than I did already. Because what is great is that we get all this, I won't say autonomy, but the ability to put wines on the list, whether it's they will submit it to the assistant wine director or the wine director, and we'll buy those wines for the other sommeliers on the staff, just to give them a sense of ownership. So I've been kind of in the background slowly putting things on the list through that avenue, and now I get to do it directly, which I'm very excited about, and I'm able to hear what the other sommeliers want and try to build a list for them as well, because they're going to be selling out of that list more than I am, and so I'm excited to give them the tools that they want to be happy.
What does the right wine mean for a meal? So like, how important is that to the dining experience?
A lot of people think pairings are the way to go through and through and through. But sometimes pairings aren't the right thing.
And by pairing, we mean that for every course you're getting a wine.
One dish, one glass of wine, 3 ounces, or a splash with that. And for some people, that's ideally the experience. Like you want to see 7, 8, 9, 10 different wines, but sometimes you just want something incredibly delicious. I try to kind of pull it out of people. Like, what do you really want? Because I think the idea is like pairings is the way to go, and that's the only way to go. It's like no. We have a list of 5,000 wines in a team. I think of some of the most talented.
You have 5,000 different wines in your list?
5,000 different wines.
Wow, okay.
I'm close to 5,000, about 20,000 bottles.
How long does it take you to wrap your head around that list?
I mean, I've been there for 3.5 years, and I still study the list every day, and I look through just to make sure I know everything, and I just try to think of questions that would be asked of me to make sure that I have that knowledge at hand, because it can be very daunting, especially when I started. But now having at least the input and putting things on the list and just working with it for so long, I've been able to get more and more comfortable.
So this brings up an important question. I think a really important question, actually, because you mentioned, as you're working with people and you're trying to figure out what to do with them, we feel so ignorant, in the presence of somebody who has, really studied wine to the extent, that you have in a restaurant that's as fine as what you have. How should we be talking to you? How should we approach you?
I think it's just being honest. I have worked in this industry for a long time, and I can sniff out when people are trying to put on airs, and my job is to make you happy.
Right.
And that's all it is. I'm here to find something delicious to put in your glass. And that's through many different avenues. And so a lot of times people will be like, hey, here's a picture of a bottle of wine that I really enjoyed. I either want something very similar to this, or I want something a little different. Or, if you bring context to what you want, because some people just don't really know what to say when I come over and be like, what do you feel like drinking tonight? But I think just being honest, saying like, these are things that I've had in the past. This is what I enjoy. Can we do something different from a different place? Or be like, I just want to try something from New Zealand or South Africa, or just, being open and honest and not trying to like impress me, because it's ultimately is doing yourself a disservice.
Right. And it's, I guess, appropriate to give you a budget, saying, I'm looking, because that's obviously critical, right? I mean, budgets can range very wide, especially on a list of 5,000 bottles.
Yeah. A budget is fantastic. Be like, hey, we're looking for a light red wine, particularly maybe from Europe, for $100 to $200. Great. There's a lot of range to talk about.
Yeah. If someone doesn't know how to pair properly wines and food, and I guess that's maybe more art than something that's hard, fast rules. If somebody says they're looking to order something, it doesn't really match the menu, do you bring that up, or how do you normally handle that?
I generally want people to drink what they want, and if they find something that they like and they want big, burly Cabernet with their caviar, I may be like, would you like to start with maybe a glass of white or some champagne to start? And some people just don't. And sometimes that makes them happy. That's a good pairing for them, even though it's not technically correct.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of that, but I'll try to like massage something else in there or something like that. I'd be like, oh, you know, let's decant that wine and maybe have like a half glass of something while it opens up, and maybe just see if that's an opportunity that they're willing to take. So just trying to gauge and kind of gently kind of nudge them in different directions.
And that's what makes it fun. I've discovered a lot of wines, you know, that I otherwise wouldn't have known about, you know, because they're like, yeah, you know, you guys know things on the menu that, you know, the average person's not going to know. And so is your favorite thing to have somebody know what they want and order it, or for people to ask for recommendations and then you kind of go to work with them?
I love when people ask for recommendations and give me like a little something to work with, because I mean, ultimately it's a conversation. And if somebody isn't willing to give me anything, I have a hard time giving them anything.
Right.
And so having the ability to just have a conversation, you get to learn about the person, and then you're like, oh, wait a second. Oh, you're from here? Or what about these wines? Or do you want to try this? And all of a sudden, you just get much more context on what's going to ultimately please them the most.
When I came to 11 Madison Park, my wife and I, we had just gotten back not that long ago from touring Italy, and you know, this particular project is focused most in Italian wines. And I'd been to Piedmont, you know, as one of the areas that we visited, and so when I came to you, I was like, you know, I think I'm looking for something from this region now. We had some really good wine experiences all through Italy, but that was just kind of our mood that night. And we went through, and I also said I'd like wines with a little age on them. I think a lot of times they're served a little too young, you know, in restaurant. Your menu, obviously, you got a lot of vintage wines, but in a lot of restaurants you can't get them.
Right.
And you came out with this, I think it was an 85 Barbaresco, you know, that you came out with. One thing that was really incredible was some of the flair on the service of the wine, because you did that thing that, you know, where you heated these tongs, put it on the bottle, you know, that. And,
the port tongs, yeah.
What do they call those?
Port tongs
So-
for port wine, yeah. That's where it originates
From port, okay. But you explained to me something I thought was very interesting, is saying, hey, you know, on these older bottles, corks can get a little dry. Rather than try to get the cork out, we can put these tongs below the cork on the bottle on the neck. You got it flaming hot, you know, put it on the neck of the bottle, and then I think you brushed cold water on after, and then boom, it breaks off clean.
Yeah.
Cork was in the thing.
Yeah.
And then there's this really cool move, because it was like the melt of the wax, and you know, so the point is, and why I'm telling the story is that, so there's this incredible ceremony around the wine, which really gives you even more anticipation. And then, you know, the wines came in the glass, and at first it was like, wow, a lot of things, you know, hit me in my nose and palate. And then I tasted it. I said, you know, it takes a while, you know, for it to really develop, to wake up. And then my wife, you know, takes her taste. She's like, oh, this wine's turned. And I'm like, no, I didn't. And then I'm tasting, I'm like, and I'm struggling, saying, I'm starting to get it. Her palate's much better than mine. Yeah. So yeah, I know more, but her palate's just fast.
Just like right there.
She's right there. And so now I'm in this really like strange and uncomfortable position, because here all this effort went into presenting it, and all this, you know, idea behind it. And wine's turn, I mean, it happens. It's just it's a percentage of the wines that's gonna happen. So it's not like it's a wrong thing or a bad thing. But now I'm like uncomfortable saying, ooh, I was almost like afraid to say, I think the wine is turned. But you know, you handled it like so graciously, because you came over and I said, you know, I think the wine might be turned, and you said, wait, right here. You went back to, because you had decanted it and you were holding it.
Yeah.
You came right back and said, yep, absolutely. Let's go look for something else.
Something else, yeah.
So how did I handle that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, I just want something. I don't want you to suffer through a wine or get through a wine if you don't like the wine, and that's the best part. Like, I want to open a can of worms, but if somebody doesn't like the wine that they order, they shouldn't drink that wine. Especially if it's a conversation that we had, because we talked about a bunch of different things. We ultimately landed on that. And, you know, I unfortunately didn't have the opportunity to taste the wine before I presented it, due to the kind of the ceremony, the kind of the circumstances. Because in that instance, I wouldn't have served it to you.
Right.
But that was perfectly handled, and I ultimately want you to be happy. And like, I'll just take the wine away. Use it for education, because I showed some of the stuff. I was like, hey, this is what oxidation smells like in Barbaresco. So it turned into an educational opportunity.
Oh, wow. So so you can train others based on this, so they can pick up on that.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's talk about some wine etiquette.
Sure.
If we can. You know, so let's start with number one, the tasting ceremony of the wine. Take me through what you think the experience is to initiate a new wine that just came out of the bottle into your glass?
Sure. I'll use basically an all-purpose glass, and what I'll do, I'll immediately look at the color. I'll see if there's any sort of like sediment or anything, you know, whether it's unfiltered or unfined, things like that. Look at like the clarity, see how much light reflects, and just the color, seeing how much it changes from the core to the edge, and because that can talk about oxidation and things like that. And then my kind of favorite part is the aromatics. I think for the most part, I could just like smell a glass of wine and be totally fine with that. But that's when I go through, I'll go in and I'll look for, you know, flaws or anything like that. And then I look for, you know, fruit and non-fruit and mineral and all these things. And, you know, look for oak presence. And then I finally taste it. Finally taste, I look for structure. I look for the body of the wine, the alcohol, the acid, the tannin, phenolics, anything like that.
Take me through how those are experienced. Like, what does acid taste like or feel like in the mouth?
Oh, sure. You feel like in the back. You know, if you're looking for like a really high acid Riesling, or if you have a really high acid Riesling, when you taste it, your mouth is immediately going to water. You're going to feel it in the back, and you know, in the back of your jaw.
Is that similar to tannins also that you kind of back there?
I used to call those like mouth sweaters. When some people are like, wait, what are tannins? Because when you think about Nebbiolo, you think of like these really tannic wines. So, you know, it's like this like astringency, but that are pleasant. It's, you know, it's challenging. It's one that calls for food. So I always look at that kind of like rough, oversteeped tea kind of things for people that aren't familiar with that word.
Right.
So I use that as my example.
How do you experience like structure in the wine?
So I think body and alcohol tend to go hand in hand, or body and sugar, kind of in the same vein. So the higher sugars you have, the more the kind of like saline or kind of weight the wine is going to have. Also with alcohol, you're going to have a little more salinity. It's just alcohol or this glycerol effect to the wine. And it also sometimes be perceived as sweet. Higher alcohol just kind of has a sweetness to it. So that weight kind of reminds, I try to figure that out. If this weight is like, is this sugar or is this alcohol?
And then you know, everybody talks about the finish. So what's the significance of the finish when you swallow it?
Sure. So the finish for me, it's what am I thinking about after the wine has been swallowed or spit, and whether it's fruit or whether it's non-fruit, and just kind of what that wine's lasting impression is, and kind of how long it goes. Because sometimes there's wines you taste it and you're like, what was that? What did that taste like again? Or you taste something and you're like, wow, I don't need another sip for a minute. I'm just gonna like let this marinate and just kind of enjoy kind of like the poetry of the wine and just kind of like taste on that.
So when we talk about tasting, and I'm not talking about just a day, but going to a wine tasting.
Sure.
Maybe you're going to even a blind tasting with multiple wines and other people, etc.
Okay.
You know, and you can't, if you swallow the whole time, you're gonna not be able to, you know, to finish basically the whole event. So talk to me about that.
Sure. It's everyone's going to do it. Everyone should do it as well, because ideally you're going to taste as many wines as possible, as many wines as you want, and you know, even spitting, you're still going to absorb alcohol. You absorb a lot of alcohol through your cheeks.
Yeah.
And so you're going to get a buzz. You're not going to miss out on any of the alcohol, but definitely spitting in. A lot of times people have like a little cup with them. So if you don't feel going to the big spittoon, which looks a little scary to be frank, and then just have the little cup with you and you can spit into that and dump it in the bucket. Yeah. But it allows you to taste way more wines and you're able to experience the wine in kind of a different way. I always swallow a little bit and I'll spit out the rest just to kind of get the finish and kind of see how it feels in the back of your throat and everything. But it is imperative to spit during a wine tasting like that, especially when you're prolonged. You're doing hours long and trying to enjoy yourself as much, because otherwise you're gonna crash pretty hard.
Definitely. So what wines do you like? Like what are your own personal preferences?
Oh, so Chardonnay is my happy place. Chardonnay basically from anywhere. I can understand if it's not well made. I don't care. It's one of those, I have a blind spot for it. I can enjoy it. But I love Burgundy. I think Burgundy is one of my favorites. Red and white, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, as well as New Zealand. I was in New Zealand recently and kind of fallen in love with Central Otago Pinot Noir. I think those wines are outstanding. And Oregon as well. I think those are wonderful.
So, and it's interesting is that you mentioned Burgundy, Old World, New Zealand, Oregon, New World. How do you find the difference between kind of like the Old World wines and the New World wines?
I think in general in the New World, you're just going to drink more sunshine. And what that means to me is just like you're going to see higher ripeness. It's going to be more fruit forward. You're going to see kind of higher alcohol levels in general. And there are always exceptions to that, of course. But with the Old World and essentially European wines, you have more minerality, or I like to call savoriness, whether it smells like rocks or, dirt or anything like mushrooms, things like that. It smells like truffles. That's really exciting. And sometimes the fruit isn't the first thing you smell when you put your nose in the glass.
And now we're back to the aromatics. It actually corroborates my experience, although I never put words to it, is that an Old World wine, typically I'm not smelling the fruit. First, New World wines, it's like you get this fruit and then you're trying to find the other stuff. So that was a really quick distinction as far as what the experience is. As far as sequence in wines, because most people say, okay, we'll start with your whites and go to your reds and then maybe a dessert wine. Is that a good hard fast rule? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way. I think bubbles basically can go well with anything. So if you just want an all-purpose wine, that's your way to go. You can do a light white, whether it's like a Riesling or a Sancerre or something like that, Sauvignon Blanc, into like a weightier white, whether it's Chardonnay or Viognier or Marsanne, one of the Rhone Valley whites. You can build it out as much as you want, or you can pare it down as small as you want, which is kind of exciting.
And then when you get to dessert wines, there's a range of them. And I never think in terms of pairing, but what dessert wines go best with what types of desserts?
I think there's an ideal way to go about this. And when you think of a sweet wine with a dessert, you want to match the sweetness to the dessert. That's kind of like my hard and fast rule for that. So if you have a really sweet dessert, you want a really sweet wine. You're not going to try and counterbalance it with a drier wine because it's going to pull both in the opposite directions and it's not going to taste.
Oh, that's
great.
interesting because I've heard it both ways, saying you want to complement or counterbalance. But actually, now I'm realizing complement and counterbalance might not be the same thing.
Right, and you can use it in, I think, savory foods, and there's much more play there. But with desserts, when you have sugar in a dish, and you need sugar in a wine, because if you have more sugar in the dish, the wine is going to taste austere, and you're not going to want to drink it. It's going to taste sharp, and then the opposite will happen with the dish and with an incredibly sweet wine.
So Sauterne would be something that you'd want with a sweet dish then.
Absolutely.
And what would you pair with cheese?
With cheese, so I tend to go rogue. I go beer with cheese.
Beer?
I think beer is really versatile, and I think there's a lot of fun to be had there. But other than that, I go back to champagne. I think champagne is something great because cheese can be very rich. Like, you need something kind of cleansing, and especially if you're doing a cheese plate with 5 different cheeses, like, one wine is not going to rule them all.
Right.
So I think something that you're going to just be cleansing and allow you to taste each of the cheese and the accoutrement or what have you individually is kind of more in line with that. Of course, port always goes well too, but I think bubbles is the way to go there.
So we've been in the details of wine, how to approach it, how to taste it, how to pair it, the varying things. I'd like to now maybe get a little bit into the spirit of wine, or maybe in the spirituality of it. You talked about, Chardonnays put you in a happy place. So what is the joy of wine? What does wine represent to humanity? I mean, it's kind of like a big, maybe philosophical question, but I'd be really curious to see how you see it.
Yeah. In the end, I think wine is meant to be shared. I mean, having a great bottle of wine by yourself is kind of selfish. It's more fun to share it with other people and talk about it. But what I really enjoy about it, and kind of why I've been drawn to it, is the idea that wine is kind of the embodiment of humanity. It's you can see politics, you can see economics, you can see geography, you can see history. Like, you're drinking humanity in a glass, and I think that's the most exciting part, because you can learn so much through it, or you can shave it off and just have a glass of something that has alcohol in it. Like, there's this wide range, and that's what I love about it and why I continue to study and drink it.
So it brings people together in a sense too, right? Because as you're talking about, politics, it's funny because one of the places we visit is Slovenia, and their borders have changed in the winemaking based on politics.
Yeah.
But the constant has been the wine, and I guess in today's environment, especially politics being very polarizing, but the idea of wine is that it brings people together rather than polarizes them.
It's one of those. That's you tasted something, and just having a shared experience is something special, and having that with a group of people or just one other person heightens the experience, heightens the wine, heightens your time with that other person, and I think it's just something you can't replicate.
And wine also represents celebration, right? So are there certain celebratory wines, like things that you say, hey, when it's a special occasion, I pull out one of these? What would that be for you?
Oh, boy. So it's easy to say champagne, but I almost don't want to say that because I want champagne to be more of not just a celebratory beverage, but it can be kind of everything. But for me, it's, like maybe a birth year vintage or something from a year that, like, something you have to celebrate. And it doesn't even have to be a great vintage. I think everyone has to get the perfect wine. The perfect wine is with the perfect people. There's so many other elements than just what's inside the glass. There's so many other environmental aspects to make sure that wine's great. Just because this year wasn't great doesn't mean that wine isn't good. It means, you're having great conversation, you're having great food, you're having a great day. All these different attributes kind of do that.
And what is the importance of vintage variation, based on what you're saying?
The vintage variation is, I think we're in like the golden age of wine. I think we have been for a while now, and just having the globalization of wine. And I think each vintage just has a different story to tell. And it's either, I don't think it's good vintage or bad vintage. I think it's early drinking or later drinking, something you're going to put down and forget about for a while. And that's what I kind of talk about. They're like, oh, well, I heard that's a bad vintage. It's like, no. It's not going to last 50 years. It's not going to last 20 years. So I think I look at it more that way.
Yeah, it's because it's interesting how what I'm finding in wines that I have, I'll call a lesser opinion of, is that, and some of them become very popular, especially in the new world. But you could drink them year to year, and they almost taste like the same wine. And I'm like, that shouldn't be right. There should be variation. In that respect, I think it's kind of like the cycles of life. Hey, you got good years, you got bad years as far as your life goes. You're still alive. There's an expression.
Right.
And I think maybe the same thing is true of wines, that they express themselves differently every single year based on what went on that year.
The way the regions change from year to year, I think that's more exciting to see how the winemakers or the vineyard managers and how those grapes adapt to different things is more exciting to me than making sure it is a 100-point wine.
Right.
I want the wine to tell a story. I want to taste the wine in the glass and think of a place rather than like a score. Every year is different inherently.
So let me ask you this: do you think wine scoring is helping or hurting the industry?
Wine scoring is great, for sure. And I think it got a lot of people an easy way to introduce wines. Like, oh, that wine is, 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 100. That at least gives them something to look at. And I think that entryway is fantastic. I think the more you get into wine, you learn your own palate and you learn your own preferences. Right. And there are going to be some critics that you don't necessarily agree with. And maybe there are some that do. There are definitely some that I think of. And I'm like, oh, we taste similar wine. We taste similarly. So I follow those wines. But as an entryway, I think it's great. Yeah. But if you become dogmatic about it and not pragmatic, that's where the problem begins.
That makes a lot of sense. So every restaurant that I've eaten at, it seems like they have their own sort of philosophy about wine, which sometimes is expressed in the list that they hand you. Sometimes through the somms that are there that are serving what have you. How would you characterize the wine philosophy at 11 Madison Park?
So the wine philosophy at 11 Madison Park, to me, is having exceptional representations of the regions of the world. And I like to have classic examples and have some of the newer producers as well that are doing and just telling the story of their region the best. There are always differences, and you're playing on not in black and white, you're playing in the gray. But I think having those producers and having somebody comfortable, if they don't want to talk to a sommelier, they go over and they're like, oh, I love Merceau. I'll have this bottle of Merceau. It should taste like Merceau.
Right.
You're not going to have that weird outlier personality that maybe making good wine, maybe it's in a different section of the list, but I don't want anyone to get a bottle and be like, this isn't what it's supposed to taste like, and have that. So I want to have the benchmark great producers on our list and have them available with vintage depth as well. And that is the challenge, right? Because we're selling wine every night. We're serving wine every night. And so it's a constant push to make sure we find the wines and source the wines. And that's why we have a team of 9 right now to do that.
Wow, so there's 9 people on staff at the one restaurant, 11 Madison Park, to source and get wines.
Yes.
Wow.
that are specifically for the wine team. We have a few people that help out, some of the younger team members, just to see what we do on a day-to-day basis. But for strictly the wine program, there are 7 sommeliers, an assistant wine director, and a wine director.
Now that you have your new position, new responsibilities at the restaurant, do you have a vision for something you want to update, change, grow at 11 Madison Park now that you have responsibility in those realms?
Now that I have the keys to the kingdom there. Yeah, you know, I love supporting people that I've met that are making great wine. I've done a lot of traveling over the past year and just kind of shining a light on regions that are still in that kind of formulating stage where they're trying to figure out what their identity is, and seeing that through that, putting that on my list. I think that's a really exciting time and things that I want to expand on. You know, you think of regions that have only been around for 30, 40 years, you know, wines of New York. I think that's really interesting. You know, English wine, English sparkling wine, I think a lot, that's going to be really, really delicious soon. It is now, and it's going to get bigger. You know, Southern Hemisphere, I think there's a lot of great stuff coming out of Australia and New Zealand. I think those are kind of regions that I'm really excited about. And of course, France and in the old standards, but like it's exciting to see these new regions come online and really find a voice.
That's great. Well, I'm looking forward to my next visit there, and you've given me a lot of I guess information or knowledge now that I feel like I could show up and do a better job next time I show up.
Great.
But I'm looking forward to it. But thanks so much, Chris, for stopping by and sharing all this wisdom with us.
Thank you very much.
What I loved about my interview with Christopher is that even though he's the wine expert at what many consider to be the #1 restaurant in the entire world, he's also very approachable, not very snobby, and really helps to enhance your wine experience. So thanks for sharing time with me and experiencing this interview. Is it a general rule that older wines are better if they've been laying down longer, or is that not true across the board?
Usually it is a good assumption. Most likely because once you, either a winemaker, a winery, or an individual lays down a wine, there is a time and there's a money that involves that bottle that cannot be done with everyday wine. So generically speaking, yes. But we have found that sometimes we found some surprises. I'm sure you had in your life that you open a bottle of wine, even sommeliers open, and they're like, wow, I am amazed. I would have never thought that a Pinot Grigio could last 25 years.
Right. Is there a difference, a general rule for white wines versus red wines, where white wines you don't age as long, and we're of course talking about quality wines, not not supermarket wines. Yeah.
No, there is really not. The grape and the wine has to start with a high acidity. Without high acidity, the wine will really not last. The sugar and the other components really help for the age of the wine, but there is not really a general rule.
Next, we have a fascinating interview with Sylvan Brda. Sylvan is the CEO of the Brda Wine Cooperative. This is a cooperative of 400 farmers in the Slovenian area of Brda that have pooled their resources. I will dare say that without this cooperative and its existence, I don't know if winemaking would have made it to this day in Brda. The story and the history is fascinating, and we had one hell of a very special experience during our time at the cooperative. So check this out. It is something that left me with goosebumps, and I hope it gives them to you too. Tell us your name and what you do.
I am Sylvan Brda. I am director of Brda, which is a co-op with 400 members, 400 family who produce the grapes.
Yes.
are our members, our owners, and we work together.
So this is a co-op, and there's 400. Are they farmers that make the grapes that contribute here?
Yes, from 400, just 40 of them are professionals who live only from the producing grape.
Full time, yeah.
Full time. Yeah. For all others is second job. It's a tradition. They keep family tradition to produce the grape, and we work wine and sell wine for them.
And I know that, so we're at the, I guess they call us the winery or the cellar here, where they actually produce all the wine. So I know there's a lot of activity going on around us here. While people are working, it's kind of a fun time of year with the harvest.
Yes, all region are devoted now for picking the grape. All other works are behind this.
Yeah. Now here in Slovenia, you talked about that most of the people in the co-op just have small parts of land and they have another job. But why did they keep the land and keep producing grapes for you?
For the first family in the past, they owned small pieces of the land, and the best pieces are for vineyard. Mm-hmm. It's something special for each family, and when you change your work, your revenues come from the other working places. All families keep vineyard for tradition. For I don't know why. It's in their heart, maybe.
So the history in Slovenia, especially in this area, Brda, where they make the wine, is very interesting. You are third generation in winemaking?
Yes,
Yeah.
More than 4 generations.
Oh, more than 4 generations.
Yeah.
And how has this territory changed from your grandfather to your father to you?
Yeah, this land is cross land. My grandfather born under Austro-Hungarian Empire. Mm-hmm. My father under Italy, in the same home, in the same place, in the same house.
Same place, same land. Yeah.
I was born under Yugoslavia, and my son was born under Slovenia. So each generation changed the state, but the only thing what is stable, what is fixed, is vineyard.
Yes, and that's maybe why people, even if they have another career, they still keep the land, they still grow the grapes and contribute to the co-op.
Yes, it's some kind of tradition. You must keep your vineyard, you must work in vineyard. If you work in the city, you can work on Saturday or on Sunday. It's only important that you produce the best possible grape.
Yeah, and you said something interesting to me earlier about even if somebody makes €1 million a year, if their land is not right, they're not right.
In Sunday evening, when you are in your village, in the pub, you talk with friends, it's not important that you earn €1 million in your first job. It's important how good grape you produce.
So there's a pride here with grape production. Yeah.
It's pride. If you miss to produce very good grapes, someone asks you, you have maybe some problems. Mm-hmm. Can I help you some way? Because I see you have a new car, but your grapes it's not on the level. What is the family attitude?
This is great. So what happened, though, which is interesting, is that in the beginning, the first people who started growing grapes had to form the co-op because they couldn't try to go to make wine by themselves.
After Second World War, this area was divided between Yugoslavia and Italy, mm-hmm. and it wasn't exist workplace. Mm-hmm. People go in Australia, in Canada, maybe to find jobs. Yeah. And then someone start with smart idea, let's make a big cellar, mm-hmm. which collect grape from different small producers, different families, make together. Mm-hmm. They start to bottling Rebula, and then this story start.
And Rebula was the original, it's a grape from this region, and it was the original grape they started growing then?
When you say Brda, mm-hmm. you mean Rebula, uh-huh. and cherry trees, the first fruit. Yeah. Brda, Rebula, and cherry is the same word.
Yes, okay, interesting. So they got together and said, we'll share a cellar so that we can start making wine?
It was impossible for 700-800 families that each family have his own cellar, his own label, his own way to put the wine on the market. So they organized this COP, and this COP wasn't some political thing. It was common sense idea to make business together. Each family take care about their vineyard, their grape, but when they collect grape together, make one wine, one label, one market story.
Each family, now there's 400 in the co-op, and each person, each producer is paid according to the size and the quality?
Absolutely, because in different vineyards are different quality, different quantity, also knowledge of different families, different part of lands are. Someone can produce something more, the other produce more quality, maybe more sugar, maybe other specifics of wine. And we start 20 years ago to collect all possible data about vineyards, about producer. And then we choose special vineyards, something like in France, Cru, Grand Cru. So it's not officially, but we know where to go to find the best fruit.
Every year they harvest, you find this fruit, and then you make 3 different types of wine, 14 varietals, I think, but 3 categories, like everyday drinking, you said?
For explain the producer why we are so specific to give them some price, higher, lower. It was easy to explain. This is wine for everyday use. This is high quality wine, and some wines are must be exciting, must have inside everything what we can extract from territory.
Yes.
And then common speech was, every day, weekend, and for special occasion.
Now, you also said that, especially in America, when people say Slovenian wine, they have no idea, right? They look around, where's Slovenia? Is it by Russia? You know, it's not a growing region.
Yeah. Also, now someone asks, you are very on east, near Russia. It's difficult to explain because the state with 2 million people.
Yeah.
It's difficult to explain, one in Seattle, one in New York, where we are. Maybe our sportsmen give us a little bit big view.
Right.
Some basketball players, hockey players are proud to be Slovenian, and we say, I am from Slovenia, where this guy was born.
Now, we're right on the border of Italy, near the Alps, right, by the Mediterranean Sea also.
Yeah, specific of this territory is that from here to Adriatic Sea, to Venice is plain. Just behind us are Alps, 2,000 meters elevation, and during the day we have Mediterranean climate, and during the night we have this cold air from the Alps. So the wine are take enough sugar, and during the night conserve the sugar and acidity. So this freshness comes from these 2 most important influence.
The farmers and the people who've lived on this land for many generations, they find that they live in one place, or their church is in one country, now it's in another country. So how did the borders get cut? Like, what was the experience through that time?
After Second World War, they signed a new border. First, it's no border, but in 2 years became border, serious border. It was a very funny situation. Somewhere the border come in the middle of vineyard.
And so you have a vineyard goes right through the middle.
And someone have house in one state and cow shit in the other state. And in one village, the church was in the Yugoslavia and the cemetery rest in Italy. So it was a very funny situation. But the people said, okay, we saw different states. We must expect what will be next year, next season.
So people kept a sense of humor about this? They thought it was funny?
Yeah, it was quite normally.
Yeah.
For them to understand that the other games, the big political games, are not their job.
Right.
They just try to survive on this land and doing what they best can do. Also, because here were the rests of two big wars, First and Second World War. When we prepare land for new vineyards, we find a lot of the rests, and exists a special service paid by the state. When you find a grenade, they call and they come to keep the grenade, and last year they keep 8 tons of this material.
8 tons?
8 tons.
Wow.
Not only in Brda, but also in other. It's special service to do this.
Wow. Yeah, so there's still the remnants of war are still in the dirt.
Because exactly here were the front line between two big
countries.
systems.
Wow.
If you go around the courtyards, you find in some places the rest, like remember for the First World War.
And so for a growing region, you would say that this is as good or better than any region, say in Italy, that the quality of the soil, the hot in the day, the cool at night, that it's an ideal region for growing wine grapes.
For growing wine grapes for dry mineral wines. This is the trend, but when we go to discover in museums or old manuscripts, the Rebula was here for several centuries, and there were also other wines, but Rebula take the most importance from different buyers, different markets. In the 15th, 16th century, the main market for these wines are Austria, northern markets. But now, with Rebula, with freshness, Rebula, Dieta Mediterranea, light food, fish food, Rebula take place all over the world.
Yeah, and I've been enjoying it since I've been here, and it does work very nicely with those foods. There's something also that you said earlier that if you want to start to plant vines and to farm grapes, it's 5 or 6 years before you can make any money at all, correct? You have to put all this time and effort in?
If exists on this world long-term business is wine business.
Yeah.
We start with this. When you decide to plant a new vineyard, then you must think really for a long time and keep in your mind all tradition, all possible data, because the first money come maybe in 6-7 years after this, and the vineyard must live for 30, 40, 50 years. We still have vineyard planted in 1950, and the best long life wines come from old vineyards.
The older vineyards. So how long does it take, if it's 6 or 7 or 8 years before you get money, how long before you get quality?
Yeah, we start producing quality in after 15 years.
15 years.
Because the plant must have deep roots, our soil is poor, so must go deep in the earth to have this balance.
Many of the farmers that I've met here, it seems that that they are, what their fathers did is what they have today, and what they're working on is what they want to leave their children.
I have one very strong impression. When I started to work here, I met one old father, old producer. He had 88 years, and he showed me on this hill I must plant new vineyard. And I start to think, he never drink wine from this vineyard, but he talked like a young man with 18 years. It was very normal that he must do something on this hill to live next generation without any prejudice, without any different things in his mind. And this is guideline for me. You just think what this earth can do, and if not you, next generation, use this.
It's interesting they have such a long-range vision because, and I know that when people walk through the vineyards, as I was walking with some of the farmers, they were feeling the presence of their grandfather, great-grandfather, you know, and it was a part of the joy of being in that area. And somehow this becomes the story behind the wine.
I don't know why, but really exists these feelings. Everyone try to do his best, because everything can change, but nobody use this word tradition, but just do this.
Yeah.
Don't think other thing.
It's just a tradition.
And once I visit also one old producer in the hospital, and they say, "Oh, it's boring here." No, he told me, during the night I walk through my vineyard, and I talk with plants.
So basically that's they have this relationship with the land.
Yeah, it's here I must change the piece of wood. Here I must add some more consumize. Here maybe it's water. I must dig a little way to put water away. You think about this.
How long does it take for somebody to really get to know their land, to really understand their vineyard?
If you're born here, you drink this with mother milk.
Yeah, with mother's milk. Yeah.
If you come like married some,
Yeah.
then approximately 2 decades. It's not
2
like
decades
to understand, because each year is different.
Yeah.
In 10 years, you have one catastrophic year and one very, very best.
Yeah.
All other years are here between, because our production is under open
Sky. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I were to come and marry somebody who had a vineyard, it would take me 20 years before I really knew the land.
People told that you need 2 decades to
Wow.
fall in, to understand.
Yes.
Not you can learn technical things in one season, but to understand what is really happened. No. So in the COP we have a special service also for them, to keep them with technological things and advices, and also to help them to choose the right plant, the right variety in the right position.
So, and this co-op in Brda is the biggest wine producer in this area of Slovenia, correct?
Yeah, in the past were also other co-ops, but we survive, change the system from the market of 20 million people in Yugoslavia. Now we work on the market with 2 million people in Slovenia, and 20 years ago we decided to go in the world. Now more than 40% of wine we sell outside Slovenia, mostly in the United States, now in China, in UK, in Germany, also in Italy.
In Italy, great. So, and you are 20 years, 20 different seasons or vintages that you've produced here since you've been working here?
Yeah, this is my 21st harvest here.
And what has been the thing that's brought you the most joy in those 21 years?
Approximately 10 years ago, when the Rebula take place on international market, we push Rebula, but to all our distributors, and all of them says, okay, Rebula, I understand. Give me Pinot Grigio,
Right.
but Rebula, okay, let's wait. And then, step by step, they know more about Rebula. It's something new, it's light, it's mineral. And when we sold the first bottles in the important markets, was very good feelings.
Yeah. so that other people can, because everybody knows Chardonnay, they know Pinot Grigio, they know all the Sauvignon Blanc,
Sauvignon, yeah.
but they've not heard about Ribula, this grape that you have here.
Ribula was known maybe 100 kilometers around Brda. But now it's different. A lot of people come here exactly to taste Ribula.
Yeah. So for you, what does wine mean for your life and for your experience?
Wine is just part of our lives. It's part of all days in the year, or all ceremony of everyday speech. I tell to my colleagues on the work, we are not producing one drink. We try to express sense of territory, sense of tradition of this land. It's not very specific things. It's just, let's put good feelings in the wine. Let's do our best. Imagine that you are artist and you try to express you through the wine, through the product.
When did they produce the first vintage from here, from this co-op?
They started to build the cellar in 54, and the first harvest were inside was 57. And still we have approximately 80 bottles. Bottles are different, bottles of 1 liter with very normal cork, short cork. We didn't change the cork. And last year, when we have anniversary, 60th anniversary of the cellar, we open 8 bottles.
Wow.
We invite all 400 families, members, and in 3 hours, slowly we open in different groups, and everyone can taste this Ribula. And it was still alive.
Wow. That had to be a very touching, emotional experience, because especially if it's the grandparents or great-grandparents, that produced that wine, to be able to open it today and enjoy what they did to get all of this started, had to be very special.
It was like in the church. Everybody was quiet and tried to understand, tried to fix the moments of all history. In my 21 years here, I have just free time opportunity to assist to taste this Ribula. We keep those bottles under the key.
Yes.
And only one key exists, and I don't know where is it. Only.
Somebody's the keeper of the key for the original bottles of Ribula.
Only winemaker have in the secret place this. If not, sometimes in the cellar, if some glasses of wine is more, maybe some temptations come. So we decide to lock. And
That's a good idea. But it's amazing. It's like having history in a bottle and being able to experience it in your body.
For me, it's amazing that without technology, without nothing, just put the wine in the bottle, small cork, and the wine survives 60 years. So it's a proof that territory is really vocated to produce great white wines. And also when we show this, some people from America or from China, normally they think, oh, okay, you have technology, knowledge, and so. No, we say, this is terroir. And we can prove this, opened wines from 70s, 60s. We never touch from 57, obviously.
So yes, and that is interesting because it's not technology built. It's just the terroir and the wine making that creates these wines that can last for decades.
Yes, it's a big proof for us that its terroir is good. Because in 57, without technology, without a lot machines, equipment, special analysis, just they put the first wine in the bottle and they put in archive. We are proud on this.
You should be very proud of it. Your story of this land and of this region it's an amazing story, and I want to thank you for sharing it.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming.
I see the tractors with the grapes, the fruits coming in now. And what does this machine do here?
With this machine, we take the samples for measuring the sugar, acids, enzymes inside
It tells you the quality of the grape, basically?
to decide quality, quantity, and quality the grape, and then decide in which press, in which vat the product go.
Oh, it's weighing it also, the quantity, how many?
The quantities decide the weight.
By the weight, so it's weighing, okay.
Yeah. Now empty in other part.
Ah.
So
Wow, and I see it's digging in there, so it's just taking a sample.
it's important to take all data, not only first impression.
So it's like a biopsy when they do when they're testing in the human body. And this is just one of the individual farmers in the co-op.
Yes.
Yeah.
His family this morning collect this grape. They take here on perfect.
So they bring it over, and then you test the samples, and then you decide how much you're going to pay
decide,
for the fruit.
and everything must be transparent. So we build the trust through this.
Yeah, like somebody decides by themselves. Yeah, now they can trust the machine.
Yeah.
That this is everybody gets the same treatment.
And also the producer take feedback, which qualities his product he can improve something.
Yep.
And
And
then
then if we could swing around here, I see on the tractor over there, you got father and son. So this is the generations how they learn, huh?
officially it's prohibited to take child
And the tractor.
on the tractor, but
not here.
it's impossible to
Yeah.
avoid this because the young guys are
Yeah, they need to learn.
they need to learn and they are very proud.
They're very proud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And later then he asked if he can move the tractor for 10 meters.
Oh, if the
And
boy
so,
can do it, yeah. It's an exciting day. So that's a lot of grapes.
Yeah, it's approximately 3 tons.
3 tons.
Yeah.
So all these will come in here, and then they get pushed through here. Wow. And now this will push it through here. What happens in here? They take the stems off?
The grapes come in one part, the stems.
They separate from the stems. Okay, so what is here?
Here is the final position. We wait empty.
I see the process. So
Yeah.
they test the grapes here.
Yeah.
They drop them up here, and then they know how many grapes they have.
And the value of his grape.
It's an interesting process. Every step is just right around
Yeah.
here.
With this system, we build trust.
Trust with the farmer.
Yeah.
So what is this room?
Sometimes we invite the group of visitors in the cellar that we can teach them something about how we produce the wine, where the wine is stay for several years.
Right. And you're barrel aging in here.
Yeah.
Now, on this barrel, it's got a clear plexiglass, so you can actually see the wine in the barrel.
Yes, maybe it's not so good for wine, but we
for
need
teaching.
this to explain the visitors how wine developed.
Yeah.
Why here they can see the
sediment,
sediments
yes.
and changing the color.
Yeah, because right now, this is a Chardonnay,
This is the Chardonnay. It's mature Chardonnay.
right? But it looks darker, almost red, so the sediment's going to settle down. And how long does that take?
1 year maybe.
1 year. And
Slowly.
it will be clear after, it'll be white.
Yeah.
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 Wow.
Because we have top wines here.
These are
we
the
put
good ones,
the
I
best juice inside, and then we only expect. And sometimes we add the evaporate.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because I've seen barrels so many times, but I never saw the wine in the barrel like this. It's very interesting. And this is French oak?
Mostly it's French oak, different toasted,
Oh, medium toast. Yeah.
medium plus. And in the last 10 years we select different woods for something is good for Pinot Grigio, something is for Chardonnay, and still we try to discover what is the best for Rebula. Till now our bigger. That's not barrique.
The bigger ones, not
Yeah.
the smaller ones. Well, let's look at some of those bigger ones. So these are the big barrels you were talking about. Do they call them barrels? What do they call them when they're this big?
It's,
Casks or
casks, baton.
yeah,
We call them
baton. And there's 10 liters in this one barrel.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It's huge. Approximately the grape from 2 hectares.
From
We
two,
need
yeah,
to
2
fill
hectare.
one of
Yeah.
this.
And how old is this barrel?
It's from the first days of the cellar. They were put in 57, 58.
So these are from the very beginning.
Yes.
And the type of oak,
It's Slavonian oak.
Slavonian oak. Yeah.
Only old cellar hands have this knowledge how to keep this baton still in use.
Use. What would this cost today if you had to buy one? How much?
It costs like one car of medium size.
About, like this is a medium-sized car right here. Okay. Wow, this one's even bigger. 12,000. Wow, these are huge. How long do you leave the wine in these?
Must be full all time.
All of them?
When you settle wine,
Yeah.
you must
take
put,
it out. How long does it take to do that?
Some wines 2 years.
2 years.
1 or 2 years. When
Yeah.
we collect from the smaller or the barrique, we put inside for 1 or 2 years.
Wow. Wow. And then you have stainless steel tanks also.
Yeah, this is more for young wines, for fresh wines.
Yes.
It's good for fermentation because inside is cooling system.
Yeah, so these are all temperature controlled then for the fermentation.
This is important for varieties where we want to conserve smell.
Yes.
Sauvignon Blanc.
That's one of the ones.
Important to keep temperature.
Got it. Got it. But it's a very, very big facility.
Under the earth is approximately 4.5 million liters.
4.5 million liters.
Liters storage. So
There's
all
storage.
the top quality are in the cellar,
Right.
in the stable temperature,
Yeah.
because wine need peace.
Now, is this cooled or this room is just always this temperature?
During the summer is maybe 12,
Yeah.
13. During the winter is 9.
9 degrees Celsius,
Degrees.
so it stays just 3 degrees. Yeah, I can feel the air is chill here and here, but it's natural. So this room is the archive of all the wines you've ever made? Every vintage?
From 57 till now, but not for every year. 84 was so bad we didn't put in the archive nothing. And the best year were here 83.
83 was the best year and
All
85
bo-
the worst. Wow, that's interesting. And I see, I mean, all the cobwebs, it's like a very dark cellar. You keep it purposely dark, right? So that it
Yes.
preserves the wine better.
It's important that it's dark and the temperature is lower than 14 degree. If not, disease come and eat the cork.
Oh,
And then you see
all the wine on the floor.
if the average temperature is lower than 14, it's okay. So here we have more than 110,000 bottles.
110,000 bottles. Yeah, it looks like a lot of bottles.
We try to avoid any movement here, but every January enter 2 or 3 winemakers to control how the wine is developed.
Yes.
Maybe they only control, or they open the bottle and decide it's still to
Too
be in
early.
archive or we must move out and prepare space for new
new bottles.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So what's behind this cage that's locked?
This is the most emotional part in our cellar. Here we take very first bottles from the first harvest in 57, from 57.
So all those years ago when the first people in the co-op had the vision to create it, this is the very first wine that they made.
Yes,
Wow.
and I must say the wine is still alive.
Yes.
In those years, didn't think to preserve wine for long term. It's common bottle
Right.
of 1 liter with very small cork.
Right.
it's amazing. The
Wow.
wine is still alive.
Wow. How many bottles are left?
Approximately less than 200
Wow.
bottles. We don't keep them in the books like some value. It's only emotional value. Maybe it's good occasion to open one.
Wow, I'd be very honored. Wow. Wow, look at that. Put it in here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
It's in.
Thank you.
Okay.
We control the volume is still inside.
Yes.
It's not.
Well, it's really all the way up to the top.
Each bottle is another story.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's amazing. Over 60 years old.
Now this wine needs some oxygen.
Yes.
So we put into the decanter. I need a candle. Normally we need 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours that wine start to show
Yeah.
his performance. Color is nice, it's not brown,
Yes. It's gold.
it's gold. Smell of history.
Thank you.
On the honor of producer from 57.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, it's amazing.
Still have everything.
Everything.
Technological speech.
Yeah.
Have enough acids to survive maybe next 10 years, maybe more. But
Yeah.
we are satisfied that it survived till now.
It's
In this
amazing. Wow.
The cork was common cork,
Yeah.
small. We never changed this cork till now.
Wow.
And I must say you have lucky hand because you choose.
Choose a good one. Well, this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, so thank you for sharing this history and having me experience the history now in the glass.
It's sign of territory,
Yeah.
of terroir.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. It's hard to understand the privilege this is, that people who pioneered this entire winemaking industry here in Brda, that this is the first bottle of wine that they produced. And I have chills. It's like you can't imagine how it's over 60 years old. It's beautiful. It has the whole story of all these decades and what was fought for here and the wars that had happened, the changes in territories, the generations of people, all adds up to being just right here in this glass with this golden liquid that every time I'm taking a smell of it, I'm literally getting goosebumps from the back of my head all the way down my neck. It's just something that is otherworldly. I talk about wine being transcendent, but this is why it's transcendent. It's where story and history meets the present day, that I'm a human being with a consciousness that can sip this and it just takes me away. I have such reverence for the people from the past and the present who honor those people, that they're gone now, but what they created can give me an amazing experience in my life. I only wish more people could understand and appreciate this. It's amazing the profound influence that world events and history have on winemaking. And the story of this cooperative is something that I believe brings that to life in a way and gives us better appreciation for what wine is and how it influences humanity. Some of the more memorable bottles I've had are Barolos. So what's a Barolo?
Barolo is defined as the king of wines in Italy.
The king. I mean,
king.
Over everything else.
It has that reputation, and definitely I would agree that it's one of the pride and glories of Italy. Comes from Piemonte, and it's another wine that is made with 100% Nebbiolo. It's an area that is, in the scheme of wine, is very small, but is one of the areas in Italy where once you enter the Barolo, you know you are in a special place. Yeah. Everything is subdivided by small little hills and small little vineyards, and the outcome is a wine that can be as simple or as austere as wine can be.
Is there certain rules around what you have to do to be able to call it a Barolo?
Yes, so like many other denominations, Barolo is a DOCG. So if you see Barolo is guaranteed to be with certain characteristics, has to be at least aged 3 years from the January of the harvest, and has to be aged at least 3.5, 4 years before it gets even on the market to be consumed.
So when are you going to your cellar and pulling out a Barolo? When are you enjoying that?
I have to understand the producer. Barolo is such a small area, but it's so complex. There is the western part of Barolo that is closer to Barbaresco, that is a little bit more feminine. So majority of the vineyard and the producer are ready quicker. And there are the older part or the eastern part of Barolo that they are a little bit more tight, they're more stringent, so they need more time. So depending on the producer, I can either have ready Barolo that I maybe enjoy as a pre-dinner, and some others that definitely I need a little bit more time before I can enjoy them.
That's it for episode 5 of Wine Revealed. I really appreciate our time together, and thank you for allowing me to take you on this journey. It was very special to me, it was very enriching to me, and something that I want to visit over and over again. I also want you to know that, of course, during the free viewing period, we're giving this away free, but if you want to own Wine Revealed and revisit this and share it with others, then there's a button on this page. Simply click the button. We have multiple packages, and right now during the free viewing period, these packages are steeply discounted. So take a look, choose the one that's right for you, own Wine Revealed, and revisit this over and over again. So again, thanks for watching this. I'll see you in episode 6.
Barolo is every day something different, and so is an experience that you have day by day.
Nebbiolo is a great variety, but a difficult variety. It gives a great results when it found perfect conditions. The Langhe area, the Barolo and Barbaresco region are famous for this. You follow the wine and the wine gives you new things to appreciate. You increase your possibility to receive from a bottle an experience at the end.
Di essere una leggenda, questo
So
sì.
it's humbling to hear legend. I don't feel like a legend. I've been doing this work for 35 years with a lot of passion, and if I have to say something about Barbaresco, of course, I would probably say it's the best wine in the world.
Questo è normale per il nostro...
This job, if you don't have passion, you cannot continue.
My grandmother, 102 years old,
102.
at 25 years old, stopped to drinking water.
Stop drinking water?
Exactly. In your life, drinking only red wine, only dolcetto wine, the more basically table one.
I can't recommend that as a
Yes,
doctor, but
absolutely.
so wine's good for you. Thanks so much for being here and watching that video. And can I ask you to please subscribe to our channel so you can find out when we're posting new content. You'll be alerted right away when we do. To share this with people you think might benefit from the information, and certainly it helps us if you like the video. So if you like what you just saw, go ahead and hit that like button. And again, thank you so much for being here with me right now.